Hi there, my name is Nicole Hebert with the Moose Show Journey to Hope team, and this is Voices of Hope.
I find your story very empowering, in a way that's raw, because you are taking vulnerability, then putting that through expression, and not always knowing maybe the outcome of what that creation is going to look like too. So then there's also a learning process with it. There's also accountability. There is a means to reflect and sometimes renew.
When you mentioned accountability, I want to point out that that's a huge part of this. It's taking accountability for your own reactions and empowering yourself to learn from it or do something with it, and not falling into that victim role. This is a really hard thing to do, and I can say that accountability has been a big thing in my life, my whole life. It's kind of ingrained in me, but most of my life I did it without the compassion side to it. And accountability without compassion turns into being really hard on yourself, perfectionism, and it doesn't work. You don't grow from that because you're constantly beating yourself down. And I think a lot of my depression has come from that space, in that never feeling good enough. And so while accountability is really important in moving forward and taking kind of action in your life and bringing growth into your life, it doesn't work without self-compassion. And I would say that is just as important to work on that loving yourself unconditionally, which is something we're kind of undoing because we sort of learn not to do that. At some point in our lives, we learn we value humbleness and not feeling deserving. And you talked about earlier about how you feel embarrassed or guilty about celebrating yourself. And so in the culture we live in is all about give and don't save any for yourself. When I'm learning, and it's really hard to do because I've got children, I'm a helper. That's my identity, I'm a server, to allow myself to feel deserving, or even to put myself first, so that I can put my mask on, so that I can put my child's mask on. It's kind of that concept. And it's a lot of reconditioning, because it's been ingrained in us not to put ourselves first. That's selfish, that's wrong, that's, and so I would say accountability and compassion have to go hand in hand, but they're both very, very important parts of growing.
Yeah, totally. Yes, very much so. And accountability on like a small step, a big step can be just noticing when you're off, when you're feeling out of place, noticing things that are constant or consistent, whether they serve you well or not, right? And accountability in celebrating ourselves. Self-compassion is such a huge discussion that is slowly becoming more fluid, and I'm glad you brought it up too. We've talked about it before. I know self-compassion for me was probably one of the key things that helped me through my journey, and it's about going back to the basics. It's literally going back to play, to learn to be bored and be with ourselves, learn to be with the uncomfortableness or the things that we're trying to fill or busy ourselves. Not to say being busy to cope is a bad thing, but sometimes we continue to do it, but then we wonder why cycles keep happening or situations keep happening, and it's because we haven't actually given ourselves time to sit with the unresolvedness of feelings, of situations, of life, And the more that we can sit, and that doesn't mean just sitting there all day with the most hardest feelings, but it's being present with the things that we're doing each day and being mindful of how these things that already exist in our lives influence us, impact us.
Yeah, really tuning into yourself, connecting with yourself, because otherwise we're not listening to ourselves. And like I said, art is a really fun way for me to practice that, to be like drawn to a color and pick it, but not from my head, from that connection with myself, and not having to explain why I picked that color. It's just like, oh, I want that, I'm gonna try it out, and really connecting with that intuition, which we really are disconnected from when we're so busy serving the world outside of ourselves. Yeah.
Yes. And we can miss moments, right? We can miss moments when we're so focused on the work, on work, and not fulfilling our baseline, which is the things that bring us joy. You know, we need joy, we need connection in order to be connected to the work, in order to have a purpose. And deciding if the work that what we're doing, whether that's office work, whether that's the job we're in, whether that's maybe the passions we have. Sometimes we outgrow things too that ultimately can keep us stuck in places that we've outgrown.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that kind of being said, because we've talked about connection, we've talked about creation and creativity, and now I kind of want to connect that to our community a little bit in terms of awareness around mental health, but also the practice of mental wellness. So in your opinion, or even in your experience, we'll go like that, experience, how do you feel that we can improve maybe the awareness and both the practice of mental health in our communities through play and creativity?
I would love to see the value of art and creativity become a higher standard, or like at the forefront of our culture. You look at a lot of other cultures that are very spiritual, and art is such a big part of that you know, the indigenous and the, you know, some of the more traditional cultures in our world that are very in touch with that intuition and with those practices. Art is, it's been part of the culture since we've been able to record human behavior, right? I would love to, in our community in Moose Jaw, I'd love to make more connections between businesses and artists and public and art, and just kind of have art, whatever that looks like, you know, it can look like a lot of different things, be part of everybody's everyday, you know, being able to have those energetic exchanges with the artwork, but also when you are surrounded by art, you are inspired to be more creative. And so I think that it plays in both ways. And like, I'll stand by my belief that creativity can be such a bonus to, or not even a bonus, like a vital part of our wellness. And I'm always looking for ways to connect artists to make, or people who want to be creative, not necessarily artists, because we tend to like categorize ourselves. I'm not an artist, and it's I mean, we're all creative, so to bring opportunities to people to come together and be creative together and explore and play and have fun in that sense. I've got a couple things kind of brewing to make those connections, and that's part of, I think, what my purpose is to bring people together and encourage that and inspire. And so I love to share what I do with other people as a source of inspiration, whether it's writing or painting or conversations. And like I said before, when you're vulnerable with somebody, it gives them permission to be vulnerable back with you. And I think that we just need outlets for our expressions, for our emotions, for our stories. And one of the things that I realized when I started talking about my story was how I used to think I was an island. I used to think that I was so different from the world and so invalidated. And when I started talking to other people about what I was going through, I realized that we're all more the same than different, and so many people were experiencing very similar things. And when they start talking about it, we all feel more validated and not so different from each other, right? And it brings people together, and it encourages those conversations. And I think that we are more the same than we realize, because people just don't talk about it.
And you had mentioned too, and we've discussed this before as well, self-compassion being a means of practice in our community for people, especially people on different paths, different journeys, different experiences. Some of that can be very much systemic, and some of that can be very much personal. So in terms of that self-compassion piece, coupled with being creative and creation, do you feel that this is something as well that needs more awareness or needs to be improved in our communities? Or what might be something that can strengthen maybe that awareness around self-compassion?
When I think about my journey, I think about the relationships early on, and when I started to kind of open up and allow people in. At that point, I really struggled with the self-compassion. I was just actually learning that it was a thing. I said to my daughter one day, when I was your age, I didn't know that I had the option to speak to myself like I was my friend. And she just was like, what? Like, how did you not know that? Because I think that is something that they talk about in school, and parents are talking about to their children now. And it's just more second nature to these kids. So, I mean, already they're a step ahead, right? But for me, it was finding relationships with people who allowed me to be vulnerable, be broken, talk about my problems and still be loved for it. And I found that through that love, I started to build my own compassion for myself through their examples. And I started to think about, well, how would I love this person if my best friend, what would I say to them if they were going through this? And kind of turn that around on me. And so I don't think self-compassion happens without community. I think we need to be landing ground for each other for those times when we don't have the resources in ourselves to find that in ourselves, and have other people who can show us that we are worthy and we are deserving, and this is how I see you. I know you can't see you that way, but this is how I see you. And even now, I'm definitely not perfect, and I have a lot of moments when I go into that self-sabotaging mindset, and I have a really strong support network of friends who know my story now at this point, and I can reach out and feel safe knowing that I will be held in that safety net within our relationship. And so, because self-compassion doesn't happen overnight, it's something that we really have to work on, but we also need others to help us along the way.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of the entire theme of Voices of Hope. And again, the hope is that more people take on initiatives to talk, whether it's interviews, whether it's connecting through art in different forms, whether it's just connecting as a group of people who simply like to walk or run or be around each other. Whether you know each other or not, it's about maybe grabbing who's ever's coffee in the lineup for Tim Hortons.
Yeah, it's not the what, but it's how, right? It's how you do it and how you make others feel. And I've often heard, when you think about somebody in your life when you were young that really made you feel seen, or like really connected or touched your life in a way that it stuck with you, what was it about that interaction? And it's how they made me feel. And so I think there are a lot of ways to connect with people and to make those impressions. And it's not necessarily what, but it's the how.
It is the how. And the how brings into, the accountability. How do I do this? How do I do this for myself? How do I talk to myself? How do I relate to myself? How do I relate to myself, to the world around me? How do I do this? And the other piece of the how, the best part, is someone asking how, which is really hard to do or admit sometimes. How do I do that? How do I open up? How am I supposed to be vulnerable? How? And it's that piece there when people can open up and be like, wow, I didn't realize that. I learned something today. I have more questions on the how. Things. And I think that's also really beautiful. I think a lot of people are opening up right now and seeing that piece. And the other best part too is sometimes you might not be an active speaker in those moments. You might not be there to talk. You might be there to just be present and listen. And I think that's another piece of the how that is so important is first we have to learn to listen to our body. Maybe the more important piece is just being consistent to being there as best we can, being present in a way that is authentically our own.
Yeah, and I think that presence that's a key word in how you can support one another, how you can speak about your own journey as well, and through sharing, like what Journey to Hope does, sharing different stories, that is bringing that how to so many other people who are watching. So I think it really, I would like to stress that community part of it, and community can look different in different ways, but we don't have to do this alone. And I think when we try, it can be a lot harder than it has to be.
Yes. Yeah, so that brings me to, my final question for you. So if you could think of a message of hope for others to hear, listen to, watch, what might that be?
For me, it comes back to building that connection with myself. Really, you can do that in so many ways. For me, meditation, running, creating, dancing, just dancing freely, playing with the kids, being present in the moment, having a cup of Earl Grey tea. It can be really simple things, but the more that you can connect with yourself and build that trust with intuition, the more you will hear what you need, the more that you'll be able to tune into those lessons and work through them. But also, you build trust with yourself, and no matter what's happening outside of you, if you have that strong connection in here, we're affected by the things that go around us, but not being knocked over by it. And the more I can work on that connection with myself, the more I'm able to stand in my pillar of strength and build that trust in myself and that confidence that I'm capable of handling whatever comes.